Hey, fellow tennis nerds, I hope all is well. Today I'm joined by Gill Gross. He has a really interesting channel that you have to check out where he does Monday match analysis. He talks about all that's happening on the ATP tour. And if you're into the latest and the greatest news and stories behind the scenes, you should check it out. I do. And we're going to talk about tennis, all kinds of tennis, how we got into the kind of sports broadcasting genre as well. So welcome to the podcast, Jill.
Great to be on with you, Jonas. I've been a longtime subscriber, a longtime viewer of this channel,
All right,
and you
nice.
fill such a valuable niche. And I think although we approach the sport in ways that are a little bit different, I think we're connected in the sense we care about uh, giving information that goes deeper and goes beyond and kind of serves the real tennis nerd, which is the name of your channel.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that's also there's a lot of facets of nerd. Like it could be guys who play tennis themselves and they don't care what's happening on the tour. It could be guys that only watch the tour and don't really play. And it could be the gear nerds that love everything about gear. But usually, if you love gear, you like the other stuff as well. So
Yeah.
it's really there's a lot of tennis nerds out there, and it's nice to have like all kind of media channels catering towards them. Like me, you studied journalism in for public communications. And how did you get into like what's your tennis background? Like you look like a pretty good player from what I've seen on videos.
Thank you. Uh, my tennis background is that, it became my number one focus and my number one sport from a pretty young age, probably like 11, 12 years old. I also played baseball, but um, the story is I actually trained a lot and I trained at good academies with great players. I never competed all that much. So I trained, didn't play that many tournaments. Um, and I ended up just kind of loving the sport, but also knowing that as far as college and as far as my career, I wasn't going to actually be relying on tennis to, again, get a scholarship or make money. So, there was a level of seriousness that other people have towards it that I don't have, even though, again, I was playing a lot and, getting good coaching. And, I really knew that I wanted to be in sports from a very young age, and I knew that I wanted to be a broadcaster from a very young age. I didn't necessarily know that it was going to be in tennis, to be honest with you, and we can get kind of into that. But those are the two things that I was really kind of steadfast on. I wanted to go to a big school. I went to Syracuse, which is a school that if you turn on the television, especially in the U.S., and watch sports, there's a good chance the sportscaster went to Syracuse, better chance than any other school, at least, right? So it's the school that would give me the best chance to do that. I played on the club team there, and I try to play as much as I can now continuously. So, good player. It's always relative, and I try my best.
That's great. That's great. No, it's important to go, and I think I mean it's a blessing in a way that you had like such a clear vision of your life, like so early on, like that you say, okay, I want to be in broadcasting, I want to be a sports commentator, because that's it makes it easier to pave out your life. I think the worst is when you're like kind of lost and you're getting older and you're not feeling like you're finding your home, you know. But still making it happen is still a challenge because it's not like there's an abundance of sports broadcasting jobs. Now with YouTube, you can build your audience, but when I started in journalism, you really had to go for like, I want to work at CNN, I want to work at this. I did political journalism for a while there, and it's there were not like as abundance of jobs. You needed to go for something very specific, like so. But what has your YouTube journey been like? You that felt natural to you straight away, or you felt like that was tough to get into, or felt a bit weird considering that you also do like tennis channel stuff and you also do more traditional broadcasting.
Well, it was a bit of a coincidence. It started when I was in high school, and I would never have made a YouTube channel. I don't think it if the radio station I was interning at did not shut down, completely closed down, because there was a sports show. It was every afternoon. It was, I think, from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. local time on the East Coast in New York, where I grew up. That I started doing sports updates for. Then they ended up putting me on the air, and I'm like in high school, and it was really, really cool for me, and I loved it, and it was a rush that was like amazing. And then the station wasn't making any money; it completely closed. and I was left basically without that outlet to talk about sports into a microphone. So it was literally a matter of, I lost this. How can I replace it? And the only way, there's not another radio station in the country who's going to put me on air, a high school kid. So I'm like, okay, we'll do it ourselves, and made a YouTube channel. Kind of built a studio with my father, which was a really fun experience, even just to build the studio. And I started off talking about all sports. I kind of wanted to be early on, and I've had a lot of evolutions here, but I looked up to a Colin Coward or a Stephen A. Smith or a Nick Wright, these people who talk about a lot of different sports and formulate opinions on it and make arguments, and they're very well informed about different sports. That's how it started. I ended up learning that the tennis videos where I brought more of a technical knowledge to it, that gave me kind of something that other people didn't have. They were doing better numbers. And once I ended up going to college, I have a lot of things to do. There's a lot of microphones to speak into. And it's now about not, I don't have anything to do. How do I kind of fill this void? But how do I keep this going with everything else going on in my life? So I made a system. I decided, forget all the other sports. They were going to throw all of them to the side. This is just a tennis YouTube channel. And I honed in on tennis, and I made a system where I could do it consistently, which is, every Sunday, I know I'm going to have time to watch the men's final, and I am going to dig so deep into the nuances of the men's final every week and post on Monday. And that was the idea, and I've been doing it for about 5 years now.
Yeah, it's great to have a system. I think that's a very smart thing, because also I think with YouTube and with everything in life, like, you need to specialize at some point, because you can't, I mean, you want to cover everything. I mean, it's your natural instinct if you love sport in general, like you're probably watching basketball, American football, whatever. And same with me. I love all aspects of tennis, but at some point you have to like find a niche or find like a voice where you feel more confident, or it's easier for you to kind of get a point across. And I think the sooner you can do that, it's a little bit easier then to kind of find your niche and find your place in media.
Yeah, and as a consumer, I've really actually gone away from those not evergreen, but those all-encompassing sports commentators. And now I find myself more and more, especially because, we've kind of shifted into a podcast world and a YouTube world. People who have that specialty are always going to be better than the people trying to keep track of 5 different things at once.
Yeah, and sports happening all the time, right? I mean, it's like, look at the ATP tour. I'm sometimes amazed. And I've been traveling a bit this year. I go to some tournaments every year, and just traveling as like a media guy and being a bit behind the scenes and just hitting a few times on the practice courts, whatever, it feels like a lot of work, or feels like at least it's energy. You go over airport, then you take the next one, you go to the next one, and then the players keep doing that for a whole year. For me, that's like quite shocking that it's quite energy consuming, and it can also lead to like, okay, delays and everything. So I'm very impressed by even if you can keep up with tennis just as a media guy, but then keep up with tennis as a pro is pretty amazing.
I don't know that there's a harder sport in the world to really consume all the information for. Because at the end of the day, and by the way, I don't think all tennis media really does a great job of this. Some do, some don't. But like, you have to watch the matches, right? Like, you actually have to watch them. And there's more tennis matches than there is anything else. There's no other sport that, especially when it comes across time zones. And, you can especially look at it when you're at a place like Tennis Channel that tries to cover it all. And you end up looking at the schedule and you go, oh my God, we're on air for 18 hours today because of the different time zones. It's like mind blowing. And yeah, that adds to it. It's truly the most consuming sport in the world, I believe.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a sport where it's really tough to keep up. You have the WTA and the ATP. Like, the women's part of the sport is very strong, like a strong product. So compared to many other sports, so if you're gonna keep up with both tours, then you're gonna keep checking challenger results and futures results, because some people do. They go deep. It's like 500-600 in the world, or this is a rising junior, or you can even go down to college tennis if you want. So like you only have a set amount of time, right? So you need to focus. Like
Right.
how has your experience been around that? Like what do you focus on, and you try to have that system to make sure your time is protected?
It's hard, it's hard and it's easy, right? It's only watching tennis, so it's needs to be put in perspective. But you really just you do everything you can. I know that's not like a good answer, but I would say that there isn't much of a system. There are, honestly, there are a lot of work-life balance decisions that go into it, and you kind of have to prioritize what you think is most important and what is going to be something that you're going to use on the show, and what is something that where that isn't the case. Right now, it's the time zone thing mostly. Shanghai is probably the worst time zone in the world, and for me, and I'm on the west coast of the U.S. now. I'm no longer on the east coast, and it's a lot of watching highlights. But then it's deciding, okay, well, look, this match was a surprising result to me. Maybe I'm gonna go watch the full match replay so that I can see what happens. Whereas maybe if the favorite who was supposed to win just ended up winning, I probably don't end up watching the match because I'm like, okay, what I thought would happen happened, and I'll catch him in the next round or I'll catch him in the final. So things like that kind of happen throughout the year. But yeah, there's no system.
Yeah, the time zones is an issue, and I think also the structure maybe of the ATP Tour is something I've talked about it a lot, like maybe ad nauseum, but it's like something might need to change in tennis at some point to kind of maybe create a stronger product and make it also more fair for the players on the lower ranks to actually make some money. I mean, that's a pretty clear issue in tennis. Whether how you solve it, it's another story, but yeah, just being able to get the time zone right. Now they're over there. The whole season is very long. They have like 1 month off soon, so I guess we're getting to the end point where people can kind of charge batteries, such as you and me, and like wait for the next year. But um, what's your most exciting part of the season for you? Like, what's like where you are, most excited to watch the tennis? Is it U.S. Open or somewhere before that?
It is the U.S. Open, but that's because I'm on site.
Yeah.
That's really the reason. I work for U.S. Open Radio, and my role for them is kind of being on the outside courts, which doesn't necessarily mean the small courts, but essentially the main broadcast will be focused usually on Ash, and my job is to kind of find the next most interesting thing somewhere else, whether it be on Armstrong or Grandstand and 17. I end up roaming around quite a bit. It's and then they kind of go to me for updates on what's happening and for storytelling and sometimes for play by play. So I'm always at the U.S. Open in person the first 10 days. There's nothing like being on site. So that's my favorite experience every year. But let's see, favorite tournament watching from home um, is probably well, I mean, then it's probably Wimbledon. I mean, I don't, I know it's not creative. I love the beauty of Monte Carlo. I love the beauty of Rome. I like the environments there. Um, I, I really like the Golden Swing, honestly. I love the crowds. I think they're locked in. And I guess I'll end on this blanket statement. The crowds make the biggest difference in the enjoyment of watching a tennis match, more so than the quality, more so than the star power. If the environment is good for me, that makes that makes all the difference. And I was talking about this with Davis Cup and the new format. Davis Cup, I could watch two players who I had never heard of because they were both 300 in the world, and if they were playing in front of a raucous environment, a raucous atmosphere in South America or something, I was interested. I still wanted to watch, and that's what not Laver Cup. That's what Davis Cup has lost here.
Yeah, I agree with the Davis Cup. I was gonna say now we get all the mixes. No, but the Davis Cup because it's like, and I think most people I talk to have the same opinion. Something got lost. I mean, I understand reasoning and the travel schedule, blah blah blah. There were reasons for the change, but maybe the wrong reasons or maybe not enough of reasons because now the product is so much weaker. And then you have like these, you go to Malaga, oh, it's good because I'm driving distance to go watch the finals, but it's not the same when you have like 8 teams coming in there. You want like a one match on a home pitch, like let's call it a pitch or a home court, where
Yeah.
it is like, oh, we chose this really slow clay to piss off these guys and to kind of neutralize their big server or whatever. And it's just like that was super entertainment because it became kind of like football or like soccer or whatever, where it's like it's a proper team sport where there's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
like tactics and planning and strategy, and it's a very important, as you said, as for the crowd. Like the crowd is vital. Even if you're gonna upset a very good tennis nation, you need the crowd. There was no other way.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And now, Spain didn't qualify, so they're going to Malaga and no Spain. It's it's
Yes.
it's it's interesting. I'm curious to see what happens long term with the event because there's been, even more change in ownership of Davis Cup. So it'll be fascinating to follow.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a letdown, like the new structure, because I think team tennis has a potential for
Yeah.
me, like seeing it as a kind of a package where you want to have the crowd engagement. I think the players like to play for something bigger than maybe themselves. Tennis being a very individual sport, and you being in your own bubble, and you don't even have your coach that you could talk to. And we can get into that whether that's a good thing or bad thing, but I think you need to package it in a way where it's like more engaging, and then the crowd, the team spirit that's very important. I think for tennis, it stands out a little bit, you know. So what do you think in general about like any possible like rule changes that could improve the sport? Do you have any strong opinions about could we do something? Should we allow coaches to sit next to their player, for example, to have more interaction with the player and the coach, or how can we make the product better?
Yeah, well, I'll start with the coaching aspect. I mean, that's been a massive change that hasn't really been treated like the massive change that it is. It hasn't been covered all that much. There has not been an announcement from the tours that the rule change is official, right? They said last year, last fall, after the US Open, that they were going to trial it for the end of 2022. That is the last we've heard about this. Now, I mean, as soon as 2023 started, I asked some coaches. I said, "Hey, is this staying?" And they said, "Yeah." But there has not been any public discussion of this. So it almost feels like, and this is kind of one of my issues with it. It almost feels like it was like sneakily done behind closed doors without kind of a true like feedback loop that I think should have been created. Like, are the players for this? Are the coaches? I know the coaches are for this. It makes them more important, so of course they like it. Are the fans for it? That's one aspect to it. I am sort of accepting that it's here to stay because that looks to be what's going to happen here. So I almost view it as a little bit of a waste to kind of continue to stagnate in the debate of should there be coaching or not. Now, I prefer to kind of play it forward to how do we make the most of it because it's here. And there are a lot of things that I think tennis needs to do to maximize this and make this a serious situation. I will start with just one example from the broadcast side of things. There are a lot of instances in which the information of who is in the player's box or who is the player's coach in a given week. We know the main ones, right? We know their coaches. There are a lot of situations where we don't know who they are. Like, could you imagine in any other sport where the commentator can't find out who the coach is because there's no way to find that information? And coaching is legal. Like, when coaching wasn't legal, there was an excuse for that to be the case. And there's no longer an excuse because it's now part of the sport. I think press conferences, that's another thing. The coaches should be made available after pretty much every match. If you know, if we're going to talk about making this into a mutually beneficial thing, or okay, there's coaching and now the fans are going to benefit as well. They should be available to the media just like the players if they're going to be a part of it. The last part, kind of about the actual product of watching the sport, that's one that I don't know that I've figured out yet. I mean, what do you think or how have you liked the mic'd up boxes? The tournaments kind of take the audio live sometimes. Sometimes it's in English, sometimes it's in another language. Obviously, the viewership in terms of their fluency in other languages is all over the map. You don't really know what they're going to say. I mean, have you enjoyed that aspect of the coaching where you've been able to hear what the boxes have been saying?
I kind of like the idea of the interaction. I've been on the fence about this because, like, I'm a part tennis traditionalist, part love tennis, so I wanted to kind of sustain its heritage and its good position in the world of sport. And with the growth of other sports and the packaging, especially in the US, of other sports, I mean, you're very good at making a sport an entertainment product, whether you know a lot about the sport or not. And I think
Mm-hmm.
tennis needs to learn from that because tennis is still kind of stale. Like, these are two guys that, unless you're playing tennis yourself, you don't know them, and then they don't put the name of the coach. You have no idea who the coach is. The coach in other sports is a key part of the team. I mean, that's the guy you give shit if something goes wrong, or oh, why did he pick this player to play on the startup like that? What is he thinking? And that gives like fans something to talk about. It gives the sport a little bit of a three-dimensional feel. I think you can maybe go all the way in the same in an individual sport, but you can build it a little bit more like their relationship, talk about it. What is this coach trying to bring to her or his game? How is their dynamic? And if you can bring them both onto press conferences, you see the dynamic. So I think it becomes like relationships are so important in entertainment. So if you have more of a relationships, even in an individual sport, it's more interesting. I mean, like, it's always fun to see like some aggro on a tennis court, in my opinion. Like, there's some drama, like Tsitsipas, Kyrgios, Wimbledon, right? A lot of drama. People love it, but there's not enough
Mm-hmm.
drama in tennis. It's just quite stale. So I would love to kind of invite more of, I mean, at least not maybe drama, but like some kind of dynamic feeling of the sport. There's something happening besides the ball being hit left, right, center, and forehand, backhand.
Right. And with coaches, right, what creates drama is characters. And if you add the coaches into the mix and you actually learn who they are, what they're about, and what they feel strongly about, you create more characters, and that will play a role, at least in creating some of the drama and the humanization that we're looking for. I guess Shelton at the U.S. Open was kind of an example of that. You had a lot of interaction between Ben and his father Brian, where you kind of did get to know both of them, and then Brian in a magazine interview ended up saying something that kind of reignited the whole hang up the phone discourse and debate. I think in an ideal world that is happening in real time. Some of that at least is happening in real time because we, I guess, are hearing from the coaches throughout tournaments, and we're hearing from coaches more during the matches. I do think if something can be done, like I do wonder about live closed captioning, because I know like the language thing is a big deal in terms of how do we make sure that coaching improves and helps the product. Like, I know for English speaking viewers who are watching on a tennis channel, for example, a lot of that is diminished, right? Like, Juan Carlos Ferrero doesn't stop talking. We know that. Most people who are watching don't know what he's saying. So that is something that I think could be unlocked, where like I don't know where the technology is right now for live closed captioning, and I also don't know what the legality of or the risks of using that on live TV is in terms of making a solution so that everybody can, I guess, get the benefits of the mic'd up on-court coaching. I wonder where the AI technology is for live translation and closed captioning. And I wonder if it's trustworthy and legal to use that on TV. So that's kind of where my mind goes. It's going to be interesting to see where it develops. I've seen a lot of different opinions on it. Joel Drucker, actually, he thinks that it should be Davis Cup style, where if you're going to legalize coaching, put them on the court and make them sit on the bench. Like, they should actually be on the court. Why are we like shouting from the stands, right? Joel looks at that and thinks that's kind of ridiculous, which I think he kind of has a point.
Yeah, I kind of like that. Like, I know that they try a lot of weird things or maybe good things in some cases, but in the UTS, Ultimate Tennis Showdown, that they're trying, like, the scoring system. I find maybe a bit much, as with the cards, but I do like they're sitting next to their coach, and obviously this is more of a humorous format because the players are relaxed. It's an exhibition, right? But it's interesting to see the dynamic if the coach sits next to them, and I've seen it like they could like invite the coach on the WTA tour. I guess was it last year? They did like a trial year. I don't know what's happening with that, or maybe they're doing it still. But and that's what led to some interesting conversations. Also some weird ones where you're like, this guy is berating her for playing bad, or it's just like was too much, and but
Yeah.
on the other hand, it creates good TV, like good streaming, good stuff to watch.
Yeah, and by the way, it's an extra challenge, but this stuff doesn't need to be taken live. If you have the resources, and I mean this is TV mumbo jumbo, but like if you have replay operators who are able to monitor the feed, and this is probably the best way to do it. They can just listen to it, and then if something is interesting, if something is compelling, you go back and you play it so that you aren't taking it live. Because when you take it live, another thing you get a lot of like the, all right, good job, stick with it. And it's like, okay, thank you. That did not need to be on the air.
That's true. It's a very good point, actually, because when I've been going to the ATP tournaments, I usually like linger around the players' boxes or sit down next to them, and you get a lot of like forza, 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 ale, ale, ale. It's like vamos, vamos, vamos. It's pretty much just like encouragement, like a mantra.
Yeah.
Come on, like don't be lazy with your footwork, so it's a lot of that. So that doesn't add any value. But if you have like maybe the chance to take a timeout, or like after the first set is finished, you have a coaching break. You find a format where you can try it and say, okay, they have like a 1 minute coaching timeout. And then you can actually create like a transcript. If it's in another language, you can at least have an expert there who can then give like either AI or a proper person just give like, okay, so they talked about that he needs to be more aggressive for the second set. He needs to attack the net a lot more. And stop fluffing the second serve on the opponent's forehand, So there could be some good outtakes, because I think sometimes tennis misses like giving the match a story arc. And I think it's great that you, as a tennis player who understands tennis, can talk about it more like in a story. Because I think when you have commentators who are maybe not so used to playing, or maybe not that into tennis, it's tough for them to break down like the story of the match. Like, why is this happening? Why is he now like choking this? So what's the storyline? Right. I think that sometimes is missed also in highlights. Like, highlights are just like beautiful shots, but I would prefer highlights if there was like a narrator who said, they started one-on-one was a key game because he got broken there. He had some really sloppy errors, and that kind of painted the whole picture of the first set, because he could never break him back because he has too much of a first serve. So then you get like what happened in the match in bite-sized chunks that are vital to the match story, kind of.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, give me big points. If you show me highlights, just show me the big moments. I mean, I'll take the good points and the great shots, but if someone hit a great first serve and had a forehand in the middle of the court and put it in the net on at 30 all, and then they got broken, give me the forehand unforced error at 30 all. Like, I want to see that, but that's never in highlights, and that's why you have to watch the matches. I also like to acknowledge like the format of live tennis commentary. TV is short, right? Like at the end of a match, and unless you think deeply about TV, which I feel like with your background you definitely have, and you know this, or if you've done it, a match ends and like you have like 30 seconds. You have 30 seconds to summarize what your thoughts are, to synthesize your takeaways and your feelings on the match. And then you think about it, okay, there's two players here. Well, maybe you have 20 seconds for one and 10 seconds for the other. That's it. Like, TV is quick. That's why, I get 30 minutes. So they get 30 seconds. I get 30 minutes. So even if they are just as insightful as me, just as they're making observations that are great and smart, I can still do more because I have the format that's going to give me an advantage in breaking down the match.
Yeah, I agree. I think the TV format, like in general, we've seen that with TV shows like Talk Show Era, whatever, like these 5-minute interviews packed with commercial breaks, and it all feels very forced and very, formulaic. Like, it's just like, okay, they've already went through these questions. There's no natural live feel to the interview because everything feels like it's scripted, right? That's
Right.
kind of talk show how it is. And that you can also see, and I understand, like, the TV format is tough to work with because it's like kind of old-fashioned, and you have these like, okay, we have to go to commercial break. Now you have 30 seconds to, and nobody can do a really good job of like trying to break down two players' reaction to the match setting and everything like in 30 seconds is tough. Like, so you have to give them props to people that do it well. It's not easy at all.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's the timing of it and being concise with your words and having, having things to say. Because also, like, that's another thing, right? Some people, there are even people who played at the highest level who I think they watch the game, but they sometimes are lacking like strong thoughts on what they're seeing. Meaning maybe they're just not the most opinionated people, or maybe they don't want to hurt feelings even, and that's another aspect of it. So yeah, there's so many different things that create different analysis styles, I would say.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I can completely understand if you played at a high level, you're now an expert commentator. You know the players maybe because you maybe were a coach or something before, and you don't want to kind of ripping people left, right. You hurt your connections, and it feels a bit weird. You don't want to be that kind of person. And then there's some people who are more blunt. That's more natural to their personality. They can be more like, okay, this guy's not performing. Something is in his head, blah, blah, blah. They're more straight to the point. But it's where the personality kind of shines. And usually I would guess that people prefer to have someone who's kind of opinionated, because that's really why you're watching. You want an opinion. Like, you want someone to say something beyond, like, he hit a volley in the net. We can all see this. But what really is, what are you thinking about this,
Yeah. The way I like to approach it is people watching tennis matches, they usually know a lot about tennis. It's not, and it depends, right? Maybe if you're doing a match, a Roland Garros match, that changes. Maybe you have some more casual viewership, but I think for the most part, the majority of people engaging in your tennis content, they know a lot. They're really, really smart, and that's how I approach it. Everyone watching me really knows the game very well. The challenge is then going deep enough and be detail-oriented enough to actually say something that's interesting to them, because they already know a lot. That's my approach. I think it's not necessarily 100% the right approach, and there are commentators who have been very, very successful, and analysts and even YouTubers who have been very, very successful creating a more digestible product and keeping things a little bit simpler or less technical. There are different ways to do it, right? You can be funny. There's room for all different kinds of approaches.
Yeah, true. 100%. When you watch a match, like, do you sit there with your laptop or your notepad and you're like really trying to break down like what were key moments? Like, every point is becoming like kind of a thing to look at. What's happening, general trend, how is this player reacting, in the breaks and so on.
Yeah, if it's a big match, I have a note-taking system on my laptop where every single point something is written down. Now it's not always very detailed, but it works as a memory jogger, especially if it's like it's love 40 and sometimes you forget what happened in the first point of the game. Suddenly it's triple break point, but you didn't know that it was going to be triple break point on the first point, and therefore you didn't really understand the importance of the first point. So you go back, you have a note written down, it reminds you, that's what happened. And that's why I think it is important, and it keeps you focused. And I think focus, just like if you're playing a match, it's important for me when I'm watching a match that I stay focused. My system of writing something down every point, that note-taking, is very important to keep me focused and to also jog my memory. And then kind of at the top of the document, I'll be writing down my larger picture thoughts. 95% of what I write, I'll never say or I'll never talk about, because it's just like 15 all, serve, plus forehand, inside out, forced error, sliced backhand defense, right? Like that, I'll write down something like that. 95% of those points I'll never talk about, I'll never go back to, but just the act of writing something down every point, I think it keeps you engaged enough to try to recognize the patterns of what's happening in a match.
I think for tennis enjoyment to be 100% like real for me, I need to watch the whole, like really watch it. I can't, leisurely have a beer with friends and watch a little bit like left eye. I need to
Mm-hmm.
actually be watching because otherwise I don't feel like I learn. And I don't follow the story of the match. I can just see points here and there. Oh, and then you have the score line kind of vaguely in the back of your head, or you're seeing it on the screen, but it's you don't see that maybe one key point that just changes everything. And also because in tennis it's such a mental sport, so one bad point can just like influence your whole mood for the rest of the set, and maybe match. So these small like nuggets are so important in tennis.
Yeah, and a lot of the short points I think get lost if you're not keying in. I think you kind of focus in when they start to rally, but those kind of bang bang, the service winners, the missed returns, all those shorter points, which actually make up usually 50% of the points, if not more. The 0 through, I'll even say, I know 0 through 4 is the standard, but I feel like even 0 through 3 is probably the majority of most points in the matches. Those points can get lost, but they're so important, so I think you can't ignore those. In terms of enjoying the match, I almost think I sometimes put myself past a comfort zone in the enjoyment area, where if I know I'm not covering a match for YouTube and I can just relax a little bit and maybe take one or two takeaways but not write something down every point, I probably enjoy that just a little bit more. But the process of kind of going full focus mode, full locked in, that the payoff is worth it, because at the end, when I have something that I feel really good about, where I feel like, okay, I've understood this, I've done a great job of understanding this match, and I have a lot of things to talk about that I just feel confident in. Like, I feel like they're good points. I feel like they're compelling. I feel like they are important to what happened in the outcome of the match. That's a great feeling. I like kind of live for that feeling, especially after a big match where, and it doesn't always happen. Sometimes after a match, I'm like, yeah, I feel like this was an important aspect of the match, but maybe it's not a slam dunk. It's all I have, so I'm going to talk about it. But sometimes there's a result, and it's okay. I have stuff to analyze. I have stuff to talk about, but maybe I don't feel like I've really dissected this match in a way that is the truest to kind of unlocking the keys to the outcome.
Yeah, it's complicated. It's not always easy to see where things changed, because these are two people with, it can almost feel like a car crash, a tennis match. Like when you're playing, it can feel very, very much like that. Like things are moving so fast, and one point make or break you sometimes, and it's hard to know which point. And sometimes it's like you're on some slope of a kind, whether it's going upward or downward, and you don't feeling the momentum as a player. Sometimes you feel the upward momentum if you're playing well, and you're feeling you're getting confidence. But sometimes when you're slipping in a match, you have a sensation of slipping, but it's not really quite sure if it's slipping in the game or how bad it is. That's a funny thing with tennis. Like, things can quite easily get out of control with the scoring system, and suddenly you're like, oh shit, I'm down a double break. What happened? I was in contention.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially, and they happen in predictable spots. Like, how often do you have that nice lead, or maybe you win the first set, especially in best of 5, I think in the third set. Now, I don't have that much experience playing in best of 5, but when you're up 2-0 and you relax, and then suddenly, whoa, I'm losing this third set. Like, I thought I had this match, but suddenly I'm trailing in the third set. And even as a viewer, sometimes I think in those matches, I can be like, whoa, what happened? The player who was losing the whole time just started getting the better of play. What changed here? And sometimes you miss it because you kind of lose focus, because you get into that rhythm of thinking, okay, this is what's happening in the match, and you expect that to just continue and continue. But just because it's happened for 2 hours doesn't mean it's going to happen for a third hour.
No, that's true. I think sometimes the 5-set story format, like I'm calling it story format, but it's like the 5-set brings out that possibility of the title shift in the third, where like a 3-set match is a little bit too short. Like, you don't have that chance of like, it's okay, you can come back from 6-3 love, and that's a little bit like
Yeah.
it. But But there you have the 2-sets-to-love lead. You know, okay, never count out Novak. He starts grinding his gears when he's down 2 sets, and he's like, okay, shit, what did I do? You know, I have to start playing.
Right.
But for many players, it's like that's like where it's on a scale, and this is where the tipping point can change, and then it happens again at the 4th set, because now it's like 2-1, and there's a whole narrative in this match where one guy took the lead, but the other guy is coming back, and for the crowd, that's pretty exciting. Even if you come in at the 4th set, you're like, okay, what's the storyline in this match? Yeah, he started really well, but then he lost his mind in the 3rd set, and now we don't know what's going to happen in the 4th.
Yeah, there's nothing like it. You know, you start to think about the fitness. Who's got the better fitness? Who can last longer? Best of 3, we're not really talking about that as much. But at the same time, we don't want tennis to just be a war of attrition. Best of 5, you know, it's not always like that, but that comes into play. Or these, you know, major adjustments, as you mentioned, there's more time to make those. But I also think it's such a focus exercise. I know I'm kind of overusing this word a little bit in the last 10 minutes, but to actually stay locked in the whole time, I think is such a skill. And like, we love everyone in tennis. Like, we all know theoretically how important the mental game is. And we use kind of blanket statements. We make decisions, good mental game, bad mental game. It's really much too vague. You have to pinpoint what about this person's mental game is good? What about it is bad? I think one of the more underrated aspects, because we like to, I guess the things that are really easy to see is who gets emotional, right? Who loses it? Who stays, or you know, on the other hand, who stays really calm all the time? These are the things that we see. But like, what about who focuses well? I think that's such a big deal. I know that it's something that like Tiafoe, Wayne Ferreira, they've had a lot of focus on that, where it's just like, okay, Francis, I think Wayne came in, noticed, look, like you just have these portions in a match where you just go away and you're not focusing. So that's what we need to figure out how to take out of your game, so that you can play for 3.5 hours and we can talk after the match and we can be like, you were dialed in the whole time. And that's the goal. I think, you know, we've seen Tiafoe with the best of 5 set success kind of these last couple years now. It's because of that. And it's also been fascinating to hear how they've trained those things, right, Jonas? It's like, one of the things that Wayne did was take away his phone during training. How are you going to focus during the match if you're on your phone all the time? You're used to having your phone as a stimulant while you're training, or listening to music while you're running. Now, that to me is kind of like, it's borderline. It's actually like a big sacrifice, right? It's hard to run without music, without listening to anything. But isn't that such good training for playing a tennis match? So I love that, to think about focus and what Tiafoe and Ferreira have done.
Yeah, I think it's a very good point. And I think like sometimes even like if you go to the gym and you do weights, for example, if you listen to something, you don't put in as much effort because part of your attention is on what you're listening to. And it sounds like pretty stoic to be like, okay, I'm not going to bring my AirPods to the gym or even to the court or wherever, or to the jogging. But it's like, I've noticed like I probably do a better performance if I don't. So like the distraction is always there with the phone, with the music, with the podcast, whatever you're listening to. So, I mean, I think like I work best when I'm listening and I'm doing something pretty mundane. Like if I'm doing dishes and listening to music or podcast, I can drive and listen to stuff. Most people do. But then like if you're going to do something that's your profession, that's where you have to stay focused. I think we overestimate human capabilities when it comes to multitasking. I'm reading this book about focus right now from Johan Hari, and it's called Stolen Focus, about the generation where we're like always on our smartphones and devices and stuff, and what it does to the community of humankind over long term, but also to like on short term to our focus and how we can actually perform, because we lose a lot because we are constantly distracted by emails, by messages, by things that pop up. So I find that really interesting. I would love if more coaches could talk that openly about their process. Sometimes I feel like it's tough to get these kind of replies. Wayne is a smart guy, obviously, and Tiafoe is a very open and engaging guy as well. But it would be nice to hear from other coaching player relationships as well.
I totally agree. Yeah, and I think coaches, it's a good move for coaches because they get that PR. Like people in our position, we want to talk about those kinds of things, and I feel like some of the American coaches, like Brad Stein, as well. They're very talkative. They're very open, and as a result, they get a lot of credit. Where we don't talk about a Tommy Paul and a Francis Tiafoe without mentioning Brad Stein and Wayne Ferreira. These long-term partnerships. Even Paul Annacone and Taylor Fritz. Annacone's a big media figure, so what the things that Fritz is working on. Those things always get talked about. I think it's a good move for coaches to put these things out there. Because they also have careers and public perception is important for them too. I mean, look at I guess like Patrick Mouratoglou has gone the extra mile. Like he's practically a media entity. He's half coach, half media entity.
Yeah, he's all over the place. He has like UTS, he has his academy, he has a website, YouTube channel, whatnot. He wants the whole tennis world in his palm of his hand.
Yeah.
And when you do that, you're obviously going to make some enemies. I hear people who are kind of discrediting his coaching quite often, which I find pretty interesting. But it's impressive what he's built, no matter what. Like he's done like a real good job at like maximizing his personal brand. And I think for a lot of people, players or coaches, building a personal brand is not really in what they do. They're not interested in that. They're in the tennis bubble. They don't really know how to do that. And giving them more exposure, I think, could help them, like also helping their careers. Because I think, like on the ATP, the coaching relationships seem to last a bit longer, but on the WTA, from the stats I've seen and everything, they're shorter relationships most often, right? So they change a lot more. There was Emma Raducanu, which was the most talked about maybe example there, but it's in my opinion, obviously not a great sign when you keep changing coaches. Like Zverev had for a while where he was like, okay, Ferrero was a month and then another coach and then didn't work out and another coach. And you're like, what's happening? You need to stick with something.
Yeah. I mean, how many of the greats can we say have had a lot of instability in their camp? Not just coaches, but you look at agents, you look at physios, a lot of the people who have been with Roger and Novak and Rafa. They were there the whole time, for the most part. I mean, and change is okay. Like, it's not like anytime there's a change, it should be seen as a negative thing. But yeah, I just don't see a lot of the all-time greats. If I look for patterns, I see stability. I see inner circles that they have a lot of trust in for a very, very long time, and there's a buy-in there. We talk about the travel, we talk about the loneliness of the tour. You need to surround yourself with people who you like to kind of be with. They become your family. They're your everything. And in terms of what your work ethic is and what your habits are, you need to try to enjoy that tour life because you enjoy the people around you, and you need to feel good about instilling those very, very professional habits. I think that's so important. So yeah, we kind of went from one thing to another here, but I look for the stability. I absolutely do. And there are a lot of interesting. I mean, Tsitsipas we've seen this year. It seems like he's gone back and forth a little bit in terms of what he wants. And, in the end, it's going to be Apostolos. It's going to be back to his father. Zverev is in a similar situation, but he seemed to figure that out, about 2 years ago, that, okay, the whole father and coach thing, it's not going to work. We're just going to go father. And now Zverev has had that for a couple of years. We've seen I think Felix is in an interesting spot with Tony coming in as a consultant and kind of being a coach, but not fully the coach. And I don't know how that's kind of worked out or if that's created some issues. Obviously, the health stuff. Yeah, a lot of this young generation has had some interesting storylines. But hey, Yannick Sinner, he had his development coach in Piatti, who he decided wasn't paying enough attention to him. and was juggling too many things. And he said, look, it's not right for me. He developed me. He's been my coach for my whole life, but I'm going to bring in Darren Cahill. And that has seemingly been an awesome relationship. The improvements that we're seeing from Jannik Sinner, his tinkering, right? The adjustments he's made. It's like every 3 months, Sinner has improved something. It's been beautiful to watch. And then Alcaraz and Ferrero, think about the lack of ego or the amount of trust that Alcaraz has in Ferrero, because not one time has Ferrero told him something in the match that hasn't worked, and then Alcaraz has been like up in arms or what the heck, man, you told me he was going wide, he went T, you're the worst. Like, we see that all the time with other players. Not once have we seen that from Alcaraz. That tells you something about their relationship.
Yeah, relationships are so important. I think like my friend is now like a new coach on the tour with Safiullin, and it's his first kind of like serious coaching gig. But they seem to have really great chemistry. It seems to work out. He's kind of inexperienced in a way, but he's also getting by because he loves tennis. He's also played futures himself, so he knows a bit of the grind. And it's been great to see because they've been doing really well. Like Safiullin has played some fantastic tennis. I hope to get to chat with them when they get back here in Marbella, right? So you see that the chemistry can be more important than anything else. You know, if you have bad chemistry, I think, like, for example, Zverev was in a bad spot mentally maybe for a while and you know, couldn't work with Ferrero, you know, before Ferrero took on Alcaraz. That was just like a disaster. Like, he was late, and I heard some stories about that. But then I think sometimes with the tennis parent, it's a tough one. I know Apostolos and Stefanos a bit, but it's like they... it's tough because like you want to cut the cord. It's like umbilical cord, and you want to, you know, I'm my own person, you know, I want to be my own, also on the WTA, right? But it seems so tough. But I don't know if it's the parent who just digs his heels, or it's because like you grew up with this. This is a person who created me, and I grew up with this person, and the bond is so strong. I cannot change it now. It's too strong. Yeah. So that's a fascinating thing, because what you rarely see a huge success. Like, none of the goats are bringing around their parents, you know, like they were more side people. They were not like on the coaching team. And I think it's tough to be like, you know, winning a bunch of Grand Slams with your father or mother. It just feels that way. I don't know if it's true or not.
I agree. I think most of them, or a lot of players, they grow up with their parents being heavily involved. You know, you look at the Williamses, but like, you know, Richard took them to a point and then recognized, I'm not that guy anymore, right? Like, I can take you this far. Now it's time for you to go to people who know more than me and can do more than me. And, you know, even though he was still a figure looming, it was still, okay, I'm no longer the main person. I think we see a lot of that. But you know what that requires? That requires minimal ego. And I'm not calling, you know, any tennis parents, I'm not saying that they have an oversized ego, but I am saying for any parent who developed their kid and then was willing to completely step aside and not intervene and be like, okay, I know that for someone like a developmental coach who is then willing to maybe take a different role as, okay, more of a parent. I'm not going to be as much of a hands-on coach anymore. That takes minimal ego to say, okay, someone else knows more than me now, and I'm going to accept that, and I'm going to let that happen, right?
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think that's very impressive. I think that's kind of generous and smart overall, because also I think it helps you maintain a more sensible relationship with your kid, right? So it's like when you're in a working relationship, I don't have any experiences with this. I'm just talking about what I've seen and what I feel, you know, but it's like that must be a bit complicated, because like you're in a business partnership, and which is very close. Like, you're a coach that is relying on your son or daughter to win tennis matches. And if they're not winning tennis matches, you don't get as much money. Obviously, the kid is unhappy as well. But it's like, it's not the best kind of dynamic. It can lead to some really ugly situations, which we have seen. You know, it's not like that tennis parents have the best reputation in history. Like, they usually are quite tough to deal with for coaches. I talk to coaches all the time, and having a really ardent, like really strong tennis parent can be a huge downturn for them. Like, they don't really feel like taking on a student or a player, because like, okay, the parent believes that he or she still is the top dog here, and then you can't
Right.
work because that's not how it should be.
Coaches want buy-in, right? It's like that's the key. It's like a diet, right? You can be a great coach. If there's no buy-in, it's not going to work. The diet can be great. If you don't follow the diet, if you question the diet and you cheat on the diet's not going to work. It doesn't matter how good it is. So I think it's like there are uncomfortable things in tennis, right? Like all of us remember when we first started playing and we didn't use a back or a continental grip on our serve or a backhand grip on our serve, right? We did this one. That's how we all started. And the first coach who was like, hey, no, you need to grip the racket like this and pronate, that felt incredibly uncomfortable, right? And we missed serve after serve after serve. It stunk. We were double faulting every point. Everybody's had that experience. It's uncomfortable. But you have to buy in. You just have to trust and go through the process. So I think that's a very kind of juvenile level of it, right? But I think at a higher level, when you're making adjustments and you're already a pro or something, when you have two voices and maybe one's a parent and one's a real coach, and the coach is having you do something that's uncomfortable, the parent is maybe questioning that. If you don't have that 100% buy-in, I think that is really going to stunt your ability to develop, especially when it comes to doing things that are uncomfortable.
100%. Like I think you can see it. Like if you're a coach, and sometimes it's a star coach, like there's someone who has like won 8 Grand Slam titles, for example. They bring in that, but they keep the parent. The parent is still like the chief in charge, the leader. That coach will not feel 100% validated, or like he's not. What is this? Like I'm entering this situation where I have to go through the CEO of the operation, which is not the player, to get through my advice or to actually help the player, and then you're hamstrung, right? You can't change a player like that, or can't help, you can't assist. So I think that's what you've seen in some situation. I think that it was what I heard with the Raducanu situation, is that her father brings in coaches just to like kind of distill their years of knowledge, take it and then sprinkle it on Emma, and then take a new one and like a dish. He's trying to make like a petri dish here of like, and turn it into a player. I doesn't seem to work that well. Like it does seem to have some. It creates like a mental problem also for the player, who has always new influences. So it's a strange scenario.
Yeah, you want identity as a player, right? Like you want to be confident in the things you do well and the way you do things, and that doesn't mean, that's not antithetical to being well-rounded, but you need to have confidence in the way you do things and try to repeat them over and over and over again for 10 years, ideally. Again, that doesn't mean you're not moving forward and you're not developing, but that seems incredibly difficult to have constantly, every 6 months someone comes in and says, we're going to do things this way, we're going to do things that way. Not just technical advice. Like, what about routines? What about what you eat before a match and when, and how you stretch before a match and when, and like all of these different things that come into play with being a pro. When you have someone different coming in, they have a different idea of how to do things. It seems unbelievably difficult to be the best version of yourself when that's going on.
Yeah, I think so. And I think we've seen some players struggle. And I think, like you mentioned, Auger-Aliassime is one of the guys been on my mind, because I've seen him lose and lose and lose kind of repeatedly this season. There was some health issues, obviously, but also it seems like maybe this relationship with Tony wasn't, I mean, it was good in a way that it worked for a time, but then that he didn't have the 100% buy-in from Tony, because Tony was still obviously Rafa's, Tio. So he was like there to still protect his nephew, right? So that made it a little bit weird, because you want your 100% buy-in from the coach as well. That like, you're all, we're in this together. It's you and me now. I need to win more tennis matches, and that's it. So now he's struggled a lot. I don't know if you have any more thoughts about that, but it's been like a tough one. Can he turn it around for 2024, do you think? Or is like, I mean, the train is moving so fast that the new generation is coming all the time, you feel, in tennis.
I think he turns it around to an extent, right? So I can't see, because I don't think I've seen an example of this. I can't see a guy who, I think he's 25, who at age 24 breaks into the top 10 for the first time, and then age 25 becomes someone who just doesn't have a super catastrophic and severe injury. Yes, it was a year where I think the knee gave him a lot of trouble, right? But it's one thing if you have a very, very severe injury. I just can't think of a player who has had the trajectory of Felix, not only be a top 10 guy at age 24, but also be a top 20 guy where he kind of stagnated for a little while, right? 21, 22, 23. We're looking at a top 20 player. How does a player like that suddenly not have the ability to be a top 20 player for the rest of his career? I look at patterns and I look at how careers go and how they play out. And look, don't get me wrong. I think it's been a confusing year for Felix. The extent to which he struggled has been jarring. It's been surprising. Even if I didn't quite buy into the success that he had in 2022 in terms of translating it into success at majors, because I still don't think that he was good enough from the baseline. I still don't think he was winning neutral rallies against elite players. I still think that it was a lot of reliance on first serve, forehand dominance. And I just wanted to see a little bit more in the return game, a little bit more out of the backhand, a little bit more point construction. So I came into this year thinking, look, I don't think him tearing it up on the indoor hardcourt season is really going to translate. But I still thought that he was going to be a top 10 player, top 15 player. I think he's got to get back to that point, because what logic could we possibly create where suddenly Felix can't win any matches for the rest of his career? I just can't see that happening.
No, I agree. I think that he's due something, but it's also weird to see. I cannot even, watching tennis for so long and following the sport, and I remember he was very hyped, like even similar to Alcaraz from a very young age, right? Like people were like, this guy, physically perfect tennis body, reads the game, big forehand, very whippy big forehand, good serve, so it was all there. Yeah. The package was all there. People were hyping it, and he kind of met the promises early on, like quite rapid progress. Then he had a bit of a stagnation, as you said, like top 20. People were like, okay, what's happening? When is FAA gonna break through? And then he had that year when like I agree with you completely. Like it was so year. I mean, it was a good year, but it wasn't super impressive until he got to the fast indoor courts where he gets to more instinctively hit the ball. I see sometimes with his shots, it feels like he shanks quite a lot for that kind of level of player he is. And he kind of, when the lower bounce, it seems to work better for him, the cleaner bounce, and he seems to be able to just use his serve and do a lot of that 1-2 punch, which he does so well. Like we just go in, hammer a forehand in the corner, right? So that doesn't really, in tennis, is such a complicated sport because like you have to master all the surfaces, and that still remains to be seen, I think. But yeah, he should be, with his talent, be back. But then there are more and more players coming, so you never know. Like it's not going to be as easy even for the guys like Tsitsipas to make their talent come true in the way they wanted it to.
I see very little evidence, honestly. Again, this isn't recency bias. I would have kind of said the same thing 2 years ago, or last year. I don't see much evidence that Felix is going to enter the tier 1 at any point. I think there are too many holes in the game. And by the way, like mentally, I think there's a certain fragility with his confidence. When he's confident, he's confident. Right? And all tennis players want that. All tennis players like that. But it's how easily is that kind of broken. And I think we see sometimes, and I think this has contributed to the struggles this year, Felix doesn't have a very sturdy confidence. I think it can be broken. It can go up and down. He's a momentum player. It's really key, getting back to the technical aspect, that he's serving well. I just want to add that the serving numbers are way down this year. First serves in, percentages down, ace rate is down. It's such a big part of his game. And sometimes it gets underlooked because he's a great athlete and he's not a 6'7" guy. But man, that first serve, it's top 7 in men's tennis. I remember last year I ranked it, and I forget where I had it, but I know it was like top 7, top 8 first serve in men's tennis. and it needs to be firing. It hasn't been this year. So I imagine, next year, starts serving great again, starts to win matches again, gets up to the, if I were to guess, between 15 and 8 in the world, that range. At some point in his career again, maybe not next year, maybe the year after. I don't see that much evidence, though, that he's going to kind of break through that seal.
No, me neither. I think it's tough now when you see that. I mean, like you said, Sinner and Alcaraz, they're both improving, and they are like at the top of the game if we take Novak out of the equation. So it's like these guys are improving steadily and are a bit more solid confidence. I like what you said about this. Some players, you see that, and you can relate to it yourself if you're playing matches. Like I play on the seniors tour, so I know like the pains of playing and like how your mental flaws come up and down, right? But you can see it in some players that it's like it's much easier to prick a hole in the kind of fabric of their ego or like their confidence. Like it's so much easier to just small things can start to break them down. While with the goats or even Alcaraz or like some guys just seem impenetrable. Like they can have a bad set, then they brush it off and like, okay, I'm going to destroy you in the next set, so don't worry about it, That kind of confidence, I think to win slams, you need that, unless it's like a one-hit wonder, but you need that kind of strong foundational confidence.
To play well under pressure, you need that confidence. That's another thing. Felix has played a lot of close matches this year. He's not winning them because the big points aren't going well. And, it's not a coincidence, right? So it's, I think, a cycle, especially for someone who doesn't break serve all that much. You're going to play close matches, small margins, a lot of tie breaks. Is your forehand going to cooperate at 5-all in the tie break? And I think that just requires, when those doubts seep in, that's going to be a major issue for a player like that. It's tough because it's a cycle. And, losing breeds more losing and winning breeds more winning. That's the crazy part of it all.
Yeah. Tennis is such a momentum sport. Like, it's crazy. The trend can really drag you down into the pits of hell. Like that. Yeah. If you're feeling you can't hit the ball properly, something goes. I mean, we've seen serves, Zverev, Sabalenka, like suddenly these tall, really strong serves can't hit a normal serve. It's like double faults, like 20 double faults in a match. Like, how is that even happening on this level of tennis? But in tennis, it can happen, So it's kind of fascinating in that sense. And we also had like Steph, who's been struggling. Do you think Steph is back to his always? Where do you think his potential is, like in terms of coming back to playing top 5 tennis? Because it's not been this year, I think.
Yeah, I think there's potential for him to get back to where he was at the start of this year. I think stuff has happened with. I mean, you can trace it back. He had the right shoulder injury, which really disrupted his momentum after the Australian Open. I loved how he was playing in January. I saw the first couple weeks leading up to the Australian Open. He stood out to me. I predicted him to make the Australian Open final as a result. I'm like, I love the way he's protecting his backhand. He's hitting that forehand big. He's serving well. He ends up making the Australian Open final. He loses to Novak. But, he gets that injury. And then since then, I think there's been the instability with the coaching. And what I'm not seeing with Tsitsipas, other than Wimbledon, I thought he looked really fiery and competitive at Wimbledon. To me, he looks, and I'm talking mentally here, a little bit less competitive when he's playing matches. He is a little more resigned when he's in holes. And I think he's left some matches on the table because of that. There were some signs of that last year. I don't know that Tsitsipas still has the aspiration to be number one in the world, to win majors anymore. I almost feel like it's been kind of taken away from him. When he was a young player, he very much expected to beat Novak Djokovic if he's playing Novak Djokovic. And I don't get the sense that that's the case anymore. I don't get the fiery competitor that Tsitsipas was when he was 20, 21. And look, like I'm always hesitant to kind of play armchair psychologist when it comes to these things. Steph is kind of he's given me not only the on-court evidence, where there have been matches that I've broken down from him in the last 2 years where I've pointed out, here's a spot where he got discouraged and his effort level dipped because he didn't recover as hard to the middle as he could have, or he made this silly decision going for the backhand winner down the line instead of hanging in the rally. Not only has he given me that on-court evidence, but he's also given me the quotes. He's said the things where, he's saying things that come across as a little bit more resigned to his place in the tennis world as being, secondary, contender, but not great champion. Or, even something he recently said about Paula, which is something that I've tried not to talk about or discuss because a lot of players are in relationships and it doesn't matter. We don't talk about it. So, my philosophy at first was, why should we focus on him being in a relationship with Badosa when plenty of players are in romantic relationships and we don't talk about that at all? But, when he says things like he said recently, which is that, Badosa has changed my mindset completely, changed my approach. I don't have the quote in front of me, so I'm not going to get into specifics, but essentially saying I have more of a perspective in life where tennis isn't everything. I've heard a lot of people who have seen greatness, who have been near greatness, like a recent conversation with Jose Higueras at the US Open where we were talking about Alcaraz and Sinner. And Jose Higueras, who's coached Jim Courier, who's been around, Pete Sampras and all those guys, he said, you have to be obsessed with being the best. If you're not obsessed with being the best, that's going to put a cap on your potential. I do feel like Tsitsipas is kind of no longer obsessed with being the best. Now he can still make year-end championships. He's that talented. He cannot get any better from where he is right now. And just, I guess, find a better mental headspace, compete hard, not make any improvements on his backhand return, not make any improvements on defending his backhand, not changing any tactics, not add to his game, and he can still be 5 in the world, 6 in the world. I think he'll get to a point where he's that guy again, but similar to Felix, I don't see him breaking through to that tier 1.
Yeah, sometimes you can feel like that there's some air that kind of goes out of a player. Maybe there's too many heavy losses, there's some personal stuff, the coaching situations that are happening, and you can see it on the court, like that hunger is not there. I mean, players can go through it for years, it can be like, even Novak had it for a while, is like when he had the period where he just didn't seem to care about winning matches. And now you see Novak these days, and he's like obsessed with like, I am winning this tennis match. There's no other way. Like there's no other way. Whether that's like found in some like quiet confidence he has inside now after winning so many slams. But you can see the desire still. Like no matter how many records he's breaking, he's still hungry. He's not going to let that guy beat him, And you need that. Like tennis, there's a cutthroat, right? So if you will see that dissipate a little bit, you need to take some time and figure out how you get that back. Because you can't compete on a world-class sport stage without it. It's not on the highest level.
On and off the court, right? We see you on the court. And if you're, competing like an animal and, you're valuing every single point and you're chasing down the extra balls and, you're focusing and you're emotionally engaged in the match. We see that on the court, but also how are you training, right? And are you making those kinds of sacrifices? And they are sacrifices. I mean, the lifestyle Novak has given interviews all the time where it's like, his diet, his training regimen, that ain't easy. Like that's not a walk in the park. Like the hours and the attention to detail that he's putting in is insane. Have you seen that too with Tsitsipas? Because sometimes I feel bad about making that assessment because, I try to keep things, if they're technical, I try to keep them technical, right? Like if we're talking about 2021 Jannik Sinner, I'm looking at a guy who likes to be a hyper offensive player who doesn't have a serve that puts him in a position to be that guy, right? I'd much rather talk about something like that, where it's in front of me, it's the tennis, I don't need to get into the psychology. For me, that's preferable. But for Tsitsipas, I'm just seeing this other side of things where I don't get the sense that the fiery competitor is still 100% there.
No, I agree. I think that's my feeling as well. Like it's been a little bit. I think it's been a year of confusion. Going back. Coming back from injury, then love life. He's been testing strings. Been like a little bit all over the place. Coaches. There's been too much.
Yeah.
I think you need a steady situation. Like I mean, like Fed, Rafa, Novak. They're so good at creating this environment where they're like in a box. Everything's taken care of. Doesn't matter if they have 4 kids. Like in Fed's case, he's like making sure. He's happy traveling. He's in a good mood. Everything's taken care of. He has created this ecosystem like a CEO of his tennis career, which is easily underlooked. Like how you set up your that's the player. It's up to the player. Who's your coach? Who's your wife? How do you deal with your family situation? How do you deal with your physio, your trainer, your food? It's up to you, really. Like you can have the best experts in the world, but you need to do it, and you need to set up this environment if you want to be the best. And Novak is the best. I mean, right now especially, but like the 3 guys, they've always been so professional at doing this thing.
That's a great point, Jonas. And remember what Tsitsipas said after he lost at Roland Garros this year to Alcaraz, really, really badly, very flat performance. He said, before the match, I took a melatonin and I took a nap. And as a result, I felt really tired and out of it on the court. So he got his pre-match and he said, I learned my lesson, and that pre-match routine, I won't repeat that again. It takes time to figure out what to do before matches, how to prepare for matches, getting that routine that you just described with Roger and Novak and Rafa down to a science so that you can repeat it and you know what works for you. Steph is 25. When I hear that kind of thing, it's not what I'm looking to hear. If someone's asking me, is he going to win a slam? At 25 years old, I don't really still want to hear I got the pre-match routine completely wrong at Roland Garros. I took a melatonin and I was out of it for my match. It's not really what I'm looking for.
If you have a team around you that you feel like you can trust and you feel like they're really like pro at what they're doing, whether it's diet or physio or whatever, I think it helps so much because you get like a guideline. It's not easy to keep track of everything yourself, but if you kind of doing it, I mean, people in professional sports, they really need to have this like super routines. There's no other way, right? There's like, it's crazy. Like people can have routines on the lowest level and it helps a lot, so it's like these types of mistakes are not what you would invest your hard-earned stocks in, right? That's not where you want to see the mistakes happen. Like anyone can have a bad period due to stuff happening in your life that's out of your control, but these things that you can control, they should be controlled. Like that's really it. And I think that's what the best guys do really well. Like they control all the controllables, so they're ready for the uncontrollables. Now, that's the basics of it.
Yeah, 100%. And you hear a lot of guys also, like Chris Eubanks comes to mind. They start to take the pre-match and post-match stuff a little bit more seriously, and it makes a huge difference. Chris, at 27 years old, has had this big breakthrough, right? He's now a ATP level player, a top 30 player, whereas he was a challenger level player for his career prior to 2023. And, he's talked about how like he would just not take his warm-ups all that seriously and his cool-downs all that seriously. How crazy is it to hear that when someone makes it, and it's not the only thing he's talked about in terms of improving, how crazy is it to hear, though, that a player can make that big a leap, their life can change, and they're talking about just going to the massage after the match, which is, by the way, offered to all players for free, not skipping it, do the massage every match, or before the match, like spend 45 minutes warming up instead of 15 minutes. And those little things can make that big a difference. It's actually crazy, but it comes down to, once again, the rigors of the tour. You do this for 11 months. It's a lot. It's hard. And you need to kind of go the extra mile with your body, or you're going to kind of not be able to perform and withstand that gauntlet.
Yeah, I saw some very positive stuff from him. The first time I saw him live, I went to Mallorca, and he won that tournament in the end. But he seems to have a pretty happy, positive disposition, which I think can help. It can also be a detriment maybe in some cases. but I think he's a young guy, so he's kind of figuring it out. But obviously, you need your. I mean, what I would pay if I was a player of that kind of caliber, where there's some money and some investments in my career, I would really try to get the best guidance in terms of like preparation and the acceleration from the match. Like what all my habits. Like how can I create a habit system and then do some like blood work or whatever, some measurements to see how my body responds. I mean, just feel it out helps as well, right? But getting the sleep, doing all this basic stuff that anyone can feel in their daily life. Like if I sleep badly, I will perform badly at work, on the tennis court, wherever I go. I will be really tired and have a pretty bad day. But some players, they seem to be a bit like happy-go-lucky, like, okay, I just figured out that this is important, and they're professional athletes. So that's kind of like you need to kind of smell the coffee pretty early, if you're in professional sports.
Yeah, or you're content, right? Or you're 40 in the world and you have a certain lifestyle and you're all right with that, and you like to go out on the road. So you are lacking sleep and you are drinking alcohol and you're 40 in the world and you're making enough money and you're okay with that. That's going to be some players. And I guess like from our perspective, it's like, if that's you, that's you. Okay. It's a funny world. Yeah. Sleep is a big one, huh? I mean, it's important, and it's really easy, I think, to not treat it as important as it is.
Yeah, there's been so much science now, and if you listen to podcasts, you get into like the Huberman and all that stuff, like where people talk about sleep. But I really started like trying to measure a bit of my sleep, which is not that important, but I really feel when I don't like have any alcohol, when I'm trying to limit digital devices and put my sleep at a premium, I feel so much better the next day. It's insane. Like, I mean, I just having like 2 beers and just going to bed and just looking at your phone for half an hour, it seems to really damage the sleep. That's not even that extreme, It's not like I'm going to bed at 4 in the morning. It's like you still feel the next day we wake up like, where am I? What am I doing? Why am I feeling so tired? When you can feel like almost jump out of bed if you have a very good night's sleep. So I think that's a very important thing to look out for if you're in, for anyone, but for sure for the players, because for them, like being tired and having a match at 11, that's not going to be good.
No, it's rough. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of contrasting levels of dedication and professionalism on the tour. Like you talk to any players and they'll kind of tell you that. And I feel like it's also known in the locker room, like, oh, this guy's really, really talented, but doesn't maybe maximize it, or the opposite. It's like this guy is only 60 in the world, but he can't do better because he takes this really seriously. He's got great habits. He works as hard as he can. And it's just, all right, the weapons are the weapons, and, the God-given talent is what it is.
Yeah, and that kind of leads me to our favorite Nick, like Nick Kyrgios. What do you think? Like he played like 1 tournament this year, or how many tournaments did he play? Like he wasn't hardly playing. What do you think of his 2024? And I mean, he's obviously bringing crowds to tennis, which is great. But this year he didn't bring himself to tennis even. So what's going to happen next year?
Yeah, I mean, I think we saw the best version of Nick in 2022. Like, we no longer have to wonder what would happen if Nick Kyrgios worked hard. We got our answer. Like, it happened, and you can look at his ranking at the end of the year, but it's misleading. If you actually look at his win rate and how well he did against top 10 competition, it is very, very fair to say Nick Kyrgios was a top 10, probably top 8 player on the tour. So that's what happens when he works on his fitness, and when he's on the match court, he really cares about the outcome. Anybody who watched him in 2022, I don't care what he says in press, he cared about every single match. Like, watch him, even when he was losing, watch him play Khachanov at the US Open. He was absolutely furious with himself for losing that quarterfinal at the US Open. So yeah, like, he was fit. His body was holding up. I remember at the start of the hard court season, I think he might have like won DC. And then he goes on maybe to Canada, or no, not Canada. I think, Cincinnati. He makes the quarters in Canada, then he goes to Cincinnati. Whatever it was, I'm forgetting the specifics of it. I kept thinking, this is where Nick's body quits. This is where Nick's body says, no more tennis. I'm done. And we just weren't getting to that place with Kyrgios last year. He just kept going and going and going. And I've heard stories like Mark Woodford, who, he's well connected in Australian tennis, of course. He was talking about how much fitness Nick was doing and how he was like paying extra. He was keeping his physio with him all year long. The plan was that Nick's physio was going to go back to Australia, and Nick was like, I think for North America, he was like, nope, never mind. I'm paying you extra. You're staying with me. We're going to keep doing this. So yeah, like that was dedicated Nick Kyrgios. We saw it. It was great. I guess this year, it's like, I guess you give him a pass. The knee injury seemed serious. I give him the benefit of the doubt, to be honest, but I don't know if we're going to see Nick replicate that. It's impossible to know. Are we going to see Kyrgios ever again put in a ton of effort on the court, be really, really happy off the court? And I think those two things are intertwined. And also just seem to put in a lot of work in the gym and kind of embrace that aspect of it. It's possible we never see it again. It's possible we do see it again. I missed watching him play tennis this year, though. That was fun. That was fun in 2022. I enjoyed that. And the tour, the tour is better. Like, forget the sideshow, the discourse, the I hate Nick, the I love Nick. It's really fun to watch him play tennis, especially when he's putting in the effort. So I hope he comes back strong.
Yeah, 100%. I think like he's a guy that sometimes I don't feel like watching, because you watch so much tennis, and you're like, when I'm live at the event, I watch a lot of tennis, and so that's always fun because it's live. But on watching, tennis TV, when there's like a third round in ATP 500, not always the most exciting. But a Nick match, I want to catch, if I can. Like he's one of those players that bring out, okay, I'm gonna go watch this because it's gonna be good of some kind. You're gonna get something out of it, right? And with his huge talent. So, and I think, like you said, it was very well put. Like 2022 was top Nick, and I think he felt some almost like vindication or relief. He showed like, okay, if I put my mind to it, I've been fooling around, not feeling mentally 100% over all these years. I have my issues. But now I feel good. I have a girlfriend. I'm getting married. All this stuff seems to come into play. I'm putting effort in. Then I can compete with Novak Djokovic even. I mean, I'll lose because Novak is Novak, but I got there. I showed that I am second tier after the three GOATs. I'm on that level where, okay, there are guys that are a little bit more exceptional, but they're exceptional in history. And if I'm on my best game, I'm right behind them. And I think that's really what he wanted, and he showed the world that that's what he has if he brings it. So I really also hope that he keeps on bringing it. I was in his sitting in his box in the Stuttgart when he was there on the grass season, and really got the full experience of, I think he really loves winning, but also hates losing so much or hates underperforming that it hurts him almost on like a physical plane. And I think people don't really maybe get him wrong that he seems not to care, but maybe he cares too much. I think that is sometimes the problem. Like he cares so much about playing the tennis he can play that it's like almost physically, impossible for him not to be on that level and keep playing, and it feels so bad. And then that shows in tantrums and stuff like that. So, and he didn't even bring a coach. He had like his agent / friend and his girlfriend, and that was his team, So
he's never had a coach. I give him credit for that. Because, his philosophy or his take on it is, I am uncoachable. It would be unfair to hire a coach because it's not going to work. And I'm like, hey, well done. Like, at least you know that about yourself. At least you have that self-awareness. That's an interesting point you make, though, about Nick caring too much. I certainly think that he does care a lot about what people think of him. And, he's very online. Whether it be media, whether it be fans, that public perception, I think he takes it very personally. I think sometimes that can be, I think he's a sensitive person, and and I think that can be something that he has to grapple with. So yeah, I think that plays into kind of what you're saying about not really hating to lose so much because there is a sense of expectation that I need to show that I am great, and not only great for tennis, which he always kind of defends himself for being great for tennis, but also a great player.
Yeah, he's his own PR team, but he's like, I always feel for the players that get lost in the whirlwind of like X or Twitter or Instagram DMs or whatever, like where they feel that they need to battle. I mean, it happens to all public personas at some point, it seems like, but it's like where you need to go and defend yourself to the general population. And I don't think that's generally good. Like, it's better to just post and ghost or just stay off. But for some players, and I think a lot of tennis players are more sensitive than we maybe think or give them credit for.
Oh, yeah.
They have, playing an individual sport, they were maybe raised, in a specific situation, or they have, like, it's a little bit of a bubble when you grow up as a tennis player. Like, professional tennis players live in a bit of a bubble. So they can turn very sensitive. They are a bit coddled, but they can also be, depending on your circumstances, not coddled at all. So it's just one guy or girl, and then the whole internet is just bashing them for something they said these days, and it's hard to know how to respond. They might not have like a huge team of media. It's not a part of a team where there's an organization where the coach can go out and say, "Hey, I stand for my players. We're a team. We're this." Like you're just one person, in the end, and you hire the rest of the team. So it's a tricky situation to deal with for a lot of players. I think they feel like there's a lot of pressure on just them as a person.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point, because there's been a lot of talk about online abuse, in DMs and such that the tennis players have to face. All athletes are getting that, right? It's not just tennis players. It's tennis players who are mainly, and I have seen it in other sports, but tennis players who are mainly putting it out there and talking about it, voicing their concerns about it or complaining about it. I don't know how to characterize it. It's horrible, right? It's understandable that a human being would be affected by that, but it's absolutely happening to every single person who plays sports. It's not a tennis problem. It is a 2023 public figure problem where people are betting on sports and caring about sports. It's not just gamblers. It's a lot of gamblers, obviously. So this is just a reality. Man, it's going to be fascinating to see how these young players deal with it and internalize it. And it's going to be really important. I mean, we had Coco Gauff just win the US Open and talk about her haters right away. Right away. It was like one of the first things she talked about was her haters. And that, basically she recognizes and internalizes all the doubt. Some players will use that in a positive way. They'll use it as fuel. They can turn it into something healthy. A lot of players are going to struggle to turn it into something healthy. It's concerning. I mean, I think there just needs to be a lot of consideration if you are part of a player support group of just making sure, is social media having a negative effect here or is it not,
It's a tricky thing because like nowadays they build these personal brands, and tennis, like you're not making like loads and loads of money out if you're outside top 100, right? So you need to take every opportunity you can, maybe have a social personality so you can get some sponsors and get some deals, even if it's smaller deals. And the big players, obviously, they get bigger deals, so they need that. And that's kind of their obligation. Like, you need to post something. We were doing a commercial together, you and Red Bull, so you have to post this. And then you have people in the comments, and the access to public people in general, like it's crazy today. Like it's obviously never happened before. So now anyone can DM you and ask questions. I'm sure they're DMing you and asking like, "Oh, what do you think about this match?" Or I'm getting mainly DMs like, "Oh, I have 6,500 racket questions," and that happens, and you reply to one, and then you have 6,499 left. And that's like a thing where the access, and you want to be a nice person, and I think they can struggle with that. Like, they can get nice messages, but they know if they reply to it, they open the Pandora's box of like, oh no, there will be a billion more questions now, or like other interactions and stuff. So it must be tricky to handle it for any public person. But for sports, you have that extra spice of like, did you win? Did you lose? Did someone have money on it or not? Or was it just like your favorite team or player that lost and now you're angry about it?
Yeah, absolutely correct. And especially for, well, I guess for all players, brands decide how much you're worth now, in part based on how many followers you have. You have X amount of followers, that's X amount of money. I mean, it's a very simple equation here. So, for everybody who says just stay off of it, right? Don't log on. Really, really much easier said than done for these guys. Can you have someone else do it for you if you can afford it? And it's not like only the top players are getting DMs about their performance. Challenger level players are getting it too. So it's a very, very tough situation. I don't know if you've experienced this at all, but I know, for me, just getting YouTube comments and getting feedback on your work, there is something psychologically where the negative stuff is much more impactful than the positive stuff, right? Like I have a great audience. Like I get so many compliments. It's so positive. But it's unfortunate, and I wish it wasn't like this, where the compliments don't stick with you as much as the insults do. I think tennis players also feel that, right? They have these great fan bases, these great support groups, a lot of people saying nice things, but it's just a dynamic where the bad stuff, the ugly stuff, it has a bigger impact on you.
I think, yeah, it's probably because it's more rare. I mean, there's probably some much smarter psychological explanation. But it's like also, if you get like a million positive comments and you get like one pretty nasty comment, that also stands out. And it's not something you experience so much in general life. Like if you're standing in an elevator, nobody's turning their heads on you. You fucking idiot. Like, what are you standing here in the elevator? Nobody's going to do that, unless they're really, weird. But so it's like suddenly you have that someone just keyboard warrior hitting you with this like angry letters, and you're from nowhere, and you're like, what did I do? What is happening in your life that I deserve this? But it's just a part of the game. It's a very strange scenario because you don't have any face, you don't have anything. It's just there in the void. But I think most people just are open with it these days that it does affect them. Like I think people in the beginning maybe try to be like, I don't give a shit. I just scroll through them and laugh, ha 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 ha. I think you get affected, especially if you have a lot of normal comments and then suddenly you get some like stupid ones and you're like, what is there something constructive here, or how should I react? Because you don't have any kind of training to how to react to this,
Yeah, and I don't know what the answer is to that. I mean, a lot of the time when you respond to someone and you show them that you're a human, they'll actually be like, oh shit, like never mind, But yes. I mean. I don't know. I don't know if this is going to get better or what can even be done. I mean, I remember Iga in the press conference was like, asking journalists to try to denounce online abuse, and I am thinking, man, if journalists could snap their fingers and end online abuse, they would be first in line. Do not worry about that. They would be first in line. They just don't have any sway or any power, and they're often victims of it. So it's really hard situation.
Yeah, everyone in media, everyone with an opinion, they will get a counter opinion at some point. Like if you're accessible, like someone will come out of the blue, especially if you have a YouTube channel. People think that it's like you want to invite this stuff, but it's like you enjoy doing what you do. You think you do it pretty well, so you just keep doing it. And the comments thing is like its own animal, right? It didn't technically have to be there. You probably keep on doing it, Okay, get some good feedback, it's helpful, but it's also it's like like you said, the negative feedback like sticks with you longer. But I mean, after a while, you start being like next day you forget it. But maybe for a few hours you're like simmering a bit. I know some people, like I talked about this in a previous podcast, where, for example, like I have followed some chess YouTubers because I used to play chess when I was younger, and one guy he posts like the pin of shame. So if it's an ugly comment, he puts it at the top, so he gets more fan engagement. He's good with the YouTube game. Like, so just to get the algorithm to see, oh, there's huge engagement here, and everybody's defending him because it's pretty smart. But also you put some negative stuff at the top, so I don't know if that's so good for you either.
I have noticed with TikTok, and I'm not really on TikTok, and I have someone who who I have helped me with it and post on it for me. But I follow it, obviously. Like, I keep tabs on the page and everything. The negative, like the TikToks that for some reason get disagreement or some sort of negative reaction, they just get the most views, to the point where it's like, it's almost like the best strategy for TikTok growth would be to like say crazy shit. I mean, it's been really eye-opening to see that. Like, the algorithm wants people, it almost wants people to disagree and just be angry about it.
Yeah, I think sometimes social media, I think Twitter is a little bit like that. Like, I'm not big on Twitter anymore. I used to be more when I did other things before Tennis Nerd. But then it's like, it seems to push like the negative narratives higher up. Like, so it seems to reward the toxic stuff. And because that,
Yeah.
I guess, gets engagement. People will get very angry about something, feel it more strongly than they feel like even if they watch like a cute puppy returning to the soldier or vice versa, So there's, cute animals is something you want to share, but anger is much stronger of like emotion where you have to react. So people then react, and then the algorithm is super happy because you're reacting. Like, oh yeah, this made you angry. I knew it. So now we're all happy because we're all angry, right? It's just so stupid in a
Right.
way. And counterproductive for humanity, you would think, like as a human experiment, as social media is, it feels like that would be if you kind of would kind of backtrace it, that would be the completely wrong way to set it up. If you would like just care for humanity and not for business and numbers, you'd be like, this is very bad. We should not do it like this because this can lead to this. But we're learning this way instead,
Yeah, yeah. It's the attention. There's a really good. I forget what it was called. There's a really good documentary on this, on social media recently that I think got pretty popular. But when you break it down, it's like what business are they in? They're in the eyeballs business. They're in the attention business, and they do not design this for the good of humanity. They design it so that you stay on the screen longer and you click more. That's it. So, once you understand that, right, you start to kind of get what's going on here. Yeah, it's unhealthy. There's ways to curate it in a way where it's better. I mean, now it's funny. There's like on Twitter or X, there's For You and there's Following. And I have noticed, right, For You, that's where you get a lot of crazy stuff. Like even if it's tennis related, like a lot of rabid fan base kind of points and, just like bias, like tearing down players, and Following, much better place for me. Now, sometimes less interesting place, but healthier place, smarter place. It's funny how it works.
Yeah. So how do you struggle with the social media use? Because I mean, you're in social media, you're having a YouTube channel, you need to follow the tennis tour. It's what you do. Do you sometimes struggle with that? Like that it's just too much, or staying away from the screen or results or whatever,
I have struggled with it in the past. I'm in a pretty. I feel good about where I'm at now. I've kind of learned, but I used to spend a ton of time on Twitter, and it got to a point where like sometimes there would be things that would happen that were very unpleasant, that would kind of like ruin my day or something, right? Like one example. This was just. It sticks out, I guess, because of the recency of it or because of how frustrating it was. Like I sent out a tweet during US Open 2022 about how much of an abnormality Alcaraz is physically, right? Just physically speaking, at his age, what he can do, just how different and special it is. It became this whole thing of like basically people interpreting it as I hinted that he was doping, right? For no reason. And, as when enough people tweet about it, that interpretation, obviously it starts the cycle of interpreting what I said as that. And that's just like one example of something that would happen. And here I am getting attacked for saying something that, first of all, I would never do that. Anybody who knows who I am, which for the most part, I'm not famous enough, so most people who are seeing the tweet do not know who I am. Anyone who follows me knows that's not what I was saying. But all of these strangers who don't know who I am are seeing this, interpreting it in a certain way for no reason, but because one person did it, and then it started the cycle. And it becomes a super unpleasant thing. I've changed the way I tweet. I do not feel the need anymore when something happens to tweet about it just for the sake of tweeting about it. Where I used to feel compelled, big story, I got to get a tweet out. And I'm going to tweet my opinion. And, I stopped doing that. So sometimes there's something that's being argued about, like let's say the Shelton celebration thing. That's a good example. Everybody's giving their opinion. I used to feel as a content creator like I had to come in and give my opinion. I have made the adjustment in my life where it's like I no longer feel like I need to. If I want to, I go and I do it. But honestly, I've kind of shied away from controversy on Twitter. And it's because I'm happier that way. It just makes me feel better that way. I don't get this, feeling of fulfillment when, a tweet gets 1,000 likes as much as I get this feeling of like kind of yuckiness when I'm getting a lot of hate, where I've just realized it's not worth it. And guess how much money I make for a viral tweet? $0.
$0.
$0 and 0 cents. $0 I get. So I would much rather go to YouTube, have a platform where I'm able to explain myself, talk to an audience who knows me for the most part. I mean, there's going to be some new people, and make money on the content and the work that I'm putting in. And that's why my philosophy has changed to a place where I'm favoring YouTube. I don't need every opinion on Twitter.
I think it's sensible. Like I thought about that now because time is very limited, and if you're like a one-man band, like most of us content creators are in a way, whether we have help with editing or something like that. But it's like you can't be everywhere, right? Like some people try to be everywhere. I've tried too much to be everywhere. You have to find where you think you do the best work, maybe the platforms you do your best work and where your kind of works best. Also where you get rewards. Like, so example, if you get some money on YouTube, like from the ad revenues and possible sponsors and so on, it's also a platform where it gives you time to say whatever you want. Like you said, like Twitter, it always had this, obviously they increased the limitation of how much you can use it, but it's like still 280 characters or whatever it is now. It's not enough to have like a common sense dialogue. And people are generally, it feels like on that platform looking for like a hot take so they can tear someone down or pile on it. Like it feels like a little bit of pile on. I even removed it from my phone because I was like tired of it because I don't use it a lot. And I went on there and I just saw like negativity. I was probably in the wrong feed though because I didn't know they changed that. And it was just like really horrible shit happening. And I'm like, what is this? Like I'm not feeling good with this stuff anymore. I'm deleting the app, right? So I feel like Insta is pretty manageable. You just put like some video, and these kind of video platforms like Insta, YouTube, TikTok is a little bit its own beast, but it's also there.
Yeah.
You can put like a 1 minute, 1:30 in some cases reaction, or you can put longer form content where you have time to explain your opinion. So in a tweet, you write something about Alcaraz being amazingly fit, and people be like, because people love to have conspiracy theories. They love to see flaws in something. So they'd be like, oh, it's on the physical enhancement drugs. It's gonna come straight away. Whatever you say. I mean, Nadal had that for many, many years. Like everybody's talking about his biceps, how big they are, and there must be something wrong, because people love to look for that, even if it's far from true. They love it, So that's where everything's gonna go in the end, and that's quite frustrating. By the way, what do you feel about Alcaraz 2024? What do you see in your crystal ball for Alcaraz, Djokovic, and the rest?
Okay, I'll answer that in a sec, real quick.
Yeah, do it. Yeah, no, it was just like something I thought about now when we talked about Alcaraz.
Yeah. The Halep thing is a great example. I did not tweet about it. I tweeted a stat about it because it was just a stat. I wanted to put it out there. I didn't really tweet my opinion on it. I talked 15 minutes about it on YouTube. 15 minutes just about the Halep thing. There's no way that I could get that 15 minutes of content and thoughts and hopefully nuance in a tweet. Zero chance. So that's a great point, and that's a big part of why I've come to just favor YouTube. Alcaraz 2024. I'm curious to see what the offseason is like. I think he's better this year than he was last year. which was not a given. He was so good in 2022 and so young. Sometimes we see, a young player have a period of stagnation. Maybe some things get worse. Maybe some things that he could get better don't get better all that fast. But I think this year he really improved on most of the things I wanted to see him improve on. I wanted to see the first serve get a little bit better, the decision making get more like I wanted to see him pick spots in matches where he decides to be more solid, and I think he's added that to his game. Not, still maintaining the aggressive identity, but also understanding, for whatever reason, moments where, okay, this is where it's time not to miss, and it's time to play a little bit safer with more margin. And Alcaraz, he doesn't default to that, but he has that in his bag now. He's done some good things, I think, to start to absorb pace better on his forehand. I think that's still maybe a work in progress. He's altered his return position, where now I think he's comfortable returning from super deep when he wants to get more returns in play. We saw the block return at Wimbledon. There's so many things he's doing this year that he couldn't do last year. He's developed so fast. It's so exciting to see where he goes from here. In reality, though, if I were to boil it down, I think in the offseason, it comes down to mostly seeing what he can do with that first serve. If you power rank the first serves in the top 10, Alcaraz is last. He's 10th. I have Rune at 9th. I know I actually ranked them, 1 through 10 recently, and I forget exactly what I had, but Alcaraz was 10th, and I didn't need to think about it too hard. Now, granted, the first serves in the top 10 are all pretty good, and it says something that Alcaraz is 10th. It says that they're serving, really, really well right now. But there's still a lot of room for improvement there. And I think, technically speaking, even if I talked to Carousel recently, and he said, all of Alcaraz's technique is so flowy, right? So natural looking, very elastic, right? The serve looks much more mechanical, robotic, a little stop and start. So that's the shot for him that isn't quite as natural. I think there's still a lot of room to improve in that area. That's the most obvious technical improvement. But there are still things, like nerve management that I still think he's learning. And as well as he did at Wimbledon, I mean, hey, you give him an A+ for that performance at Wimbledon in the final where he managed his nerves. There are still moments, if you look at the year as a whole, there are still moments where it's not so good. You break down his numbers against Sinner in the head-to-head. My goodness, the break point conversions is plummeting compared to his return points won. He's like 9% worse return points won on break points versus where he's at on a regular return point. Huge difference, and the sample size is big now. We're looking at I'm pretty sure, well over 60 break points in our sample size. A lot of points. Obviously Roland Garros, he cramps because, he struggles with that occasion. So that's still something that I'm looking for and I'm watching for. It's like, is he staying calm? Is he handling the big moments and the pressure points as well as he can be? Oh, and also focus is something that I think can get better. North American hardcourt summer, there were a lot of moments where it did look like he got a little bit bored, got a little bit careless, made some mistakes, stuff got close. He played all 3 setters all summer. Wasn't beating anybody in straights because he did have moments in matches where he dipped. And lastly, I think with the forehand, sometimes I feel like it's the best forehand in the world. Sometimes it's a little erratic. Can he get that a little more consistent? I'm curious to see if he can make it a forehand where we don't have to think about if it's the best or if it's not the best. Right now, I'm kind of on the fence. I don't know. Sometimes it leaks errors. It sprays a little bit too much for me to kind of give that kind of title as, oh yeah, best forehand in the world, it's Alcaraz. I'm not quite there yet. Can he get it there? I'm curious to see that as well.
Yeah, those are great points. I agree with everything. I think he has a lot of potential to improve, and it seems like they're doing the work and they're analyzing, similarly what you laid out here, what are the key improvements. And I don't think they will overlook the serve, because that's clearly, also from a technical point of view, you see that it looks like a different person serving. It looks like someone is serving, and then he plays the rally. It's like it switched something out, in the middle of the point, and it's like that looks a bit strange to me because obviously the physical and the natural talent he has should be able. But then the serve is also, that's like the golf swing of tennis. Like that's a static shot, except for you throwing up the ball. And people think, oh, that should be the easiest, but it's also the most biomechanically complicated shot. So you get a serve, and then to try to improve it, you've seen like Novak did it. It took him quite a while to get the serve as good as it is now. And that would be devastating for a lot of players if he gets better at the serve and more consistent on the forehand, for sure. I think that would be something for sure. What do you think about Novak? Do you think three more slams for 1 year, or do you see that the train is slowly slowing down?
Not a lot of signs that it's slowing down. I mean, eventually it will. I think Alcaraz is a big X factor. They're going to play some big matches in slams, if I were to guess, next year. And who comes through those matches is going to be a big deal. And, you kind of know what level Novak is going to bring to it. The question is, like, can Alcaraz make another leap? Can Alcaraz leap to a point where, I don't know, he separates himself from Novak? Like, is that possible? Can he make those improvements that would be necessary for him to do that? That's going to really factor in. But yeah, other than that, I think Novak comes into 2024 very motivated, especially because of the Olympics. And, that is something he values a lot. He's underperformed by his standards in the Olympics. And, I expect that gives him, as it did in 2021, it gives him a little bit of an extra zeal. Physically, Novak has been so good. A little bit of injury issues at times this year, but, he's always been able to work through them. Physically, he looks so good, so preserved, I'll say, at his age, that, one of the main things that I kind of like to read for him is, where is his motivation at? And I don't think in 2024 it's going to be much of a problem with the Olympics. 2025, oh, and by the way, Alcaraz, I think he's going to be very excited at the prospect of competing with him. But if he wins a couple more, we start to go into 2025, 2026. I do think we might start to see, we might get to a point where Novak is going to maybe have some questions about how much is the fire burning for him to continue to, again, dedicate himself as much as we know he dedicates. All I'm saying is that's not infinite, right? There might be a limit to that. And it might be for 98% of tennis players, what ends your career is your body says, I'm out. For Novak, it might not be. For Novak, it might be the mind, the motivation. It might say, okay, I'm done now. And that's something I think to look for down the road. But next year, I don't see any signs of it slowing down. You go into next year and you look at, I still think especially off of hard court, maybe it's a little bit more complicated on hard court, but off of hard court, Djokovic and Alcaraz as the two guys who are going to compete for the biggest titles in all likelihood.
Yeah, I agree to that. And he looks super fresh. I actually talked to his assistant coach, who's a friend of mine, the other day, and I asked him, like, what do you think? What's your feeling? Because he's there all the time, Carlos, and he's like, yeah, he's still hungry, but it's like it's clear. I think that it's more about, it's 100% about the slams and the Olympics. It's the Masters. I think that's kind of sailed a little bit, like the motivation to win Masters titles. That's just preparation. But then winning the slams, winning Olympics, I think that he's still pretty much as dedicated as ever. But then, like, how long? If can he get to 26, 27? Like, then what happens? At some point, like you said, motivation will start fading a bit, and maybe he just keeps winning until Rafa retires, and then he feels like, okay, yeah, who's gonna catch me now? Like, there's no chance, What do you think about Rafa? Like, is he? It's hard to know, but he looks like he's training, but it's been a while since he's played some tennis matches.
Yeah, look, I'll just be happy if he's feeling good and healthy and competing and gets a good curtain call at this point. It's hard to expect all that much from him, just given how we've seen. Frankly, we've just seen the movement deteriorate quite a bit. especially towards the tail end of 2022. Obviously, first half of 2022 was amazing, incredible, so successful. But then, started with the ab injury. But then after the ab injury, it looked like the lateral movement was pretty strained. And, he probably gets to a point where, I still think he can play good tennis, but if his movement is 70% of what it needs to be, then, it's hard to see him competing for the biggest titles the way he used to. But I don't even think that is top of mind for him. I think he just wants to be healthy and maybe go out on his own terms. And look, not everybody gets that. Like Roger didn't really get that. It's hard because, again, usually it's the body that tells you when to retire. It's not like, all right, I'm good, I'm done now. Like that's not how most retirements go in tennis. So hopefully, I've seen the training videos. Good to see. Hopefully he just withstands the rigors physically of the 2024 season. And if he does, what I guarantee you is it's going to be fun to watch. It's going to bring magical moments, and it's going to be great for the sport and great for Rafa fans as well.
Agree. And we hope he gets, like, if it's a farewell tour of some kind of farewell year, at least that he can play some healthy tournaments. So he has like a little bit of a better farewell than Roger was a little bit stunted in a way, but nice with the hand holding in the end, and stuff like that. So that was still good. American tennis, like the last question I have here, is what do you think, Shelton? Who is going to come out of this group of, like, you have a really strong crop of players right now. Like it's Tommy Paul, it's Shelton, it's Taylor Fritz, Tiafoe, and Korda, for example. Who do you think will make the biggest strides and have the biggest impact on American tennis in next year?
Shelton and Korda, I think, have the most potential to be top 5 players in the future. Fritz did sniff the top 5 for a bit. But if I'm going to say, who's going to win a major, I see it much more with Shelton and Korda and the amount of kind of improvement that's available to them. I simply see it much more than I would with a Tommy Paul or Francis Tiafoe or Taylor Fritz, who are further along in their development. So there's not as much space for them to grow. I think with Ben, there's an unbelievable amount of low-hanging fruit, untapped potential, technically, in terms of his decision-making, in terms of even on his serve, hitting spots more to try to rein in that 140 miles per hour that he has, but the mixing of spins that he also has. Unbelievable movement for his frame, which is just this really strong, powerful frame. So I think Shelton is going to be top 5, but I also think it's not going to happen as quickly as people think. Like I think Shelton won't have his best years and won't really arrive and meet his potential for another 4 or so years. Like I actually think he's far off of that. Korda, further along. It's about staying healthy. He's got to improve that durability. That's been an issue. Doesn't have the most varied game, but he's got good volleys. He's got a good backhand slice, and he is a pure, easy power, smooth ball striker. What concerns me with Korda is he's never going to be a guy who like defends super, super well. Can you be a top 5 player? Certainly you can be a top 10 player, but you can be a top 5 player. You're going to be a player who wins majors if you're not someone who kind of brings that defensive aspect to the game. Tough. Not easy to do. I think for Korda to really meet that potential, he needs to kind of bring that big ground game that he has, marry it with an elite serve, and now I can see someone who's able to win majors, but I think that's what it's going to take. So Korda, I'm a little bit more 50-50. I think Shelton has the most potential out of all of them, but I also think it's going to take time.
Yeah, I think that's a good read. This was a great talk, man. We could probably talk for 3 more hours to 2 really strong tennis nerds. And you're welcome anytime you want to talk. But it's getting late and I don't want to take more than 2 hours out of your time. Because it's funny with these podcasts, it's always like you start talking, you usually set like an hour, and then you're like, it's never an hour. Like it's they just get into tennis. You have more like, we could talk about this, talk about this.
Yeah. Hey, this has been awesome. And I look forward to having you on my show at some point as well. Yeah, it's just fun to kind of have this free flowing kind of take it wherever it goes chat with you.
That was super fun, super fun. Like, you're a very knowledgeable guy. Where can people reach you? I guess your YouTube channel, Gill Gross, and do you have any other social media that you extra want to push?
On podcast platforms, it's Monday Match Analysis. If you want to find me on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and yeah, Twitter. Even though I tweet less, I still tweet at Gill_Gross, Gill with 2 L's.
Awesome, man. You have the best of day. It's early for you. It's late for me. And whenever you want to jump on and talk tennis, I guess we can get into some interesting topical discussions starting next season, because we have new action on the tennis tour to look forward to.
Absolutely. You have a good night, Jonas. Thanks.
Thanks, man. Take care.